Hi, Kevin at Ledoux Guitars again. Several days ago, I made a video demonstrating this jig. The video was about cutting very thin, slicing very thin strips of wood or other material that you might use for inlay work or other purposes in your guitar making. Well, today, um, this video is sort of a continuance of that whole thing. What I'm doing today is making even smaller pieces. So I'm going to change positions with the camera and show you what I mean here. So what I'm attempting to do here is make little purfling strips like these. These are 65 thousandths by 65 thousandths, or very close to it. Um, Tolerance is fairly tight on these. These are made to match these purfling strips, these Teflon strips, I should say, uh, which will be put around the guitar right along with the binding, and then of course pulled out later on, and those openings will be re-inlaid with these strips. Now, you might be able to do this with wood. I've never done these in wood because of their thickness. The wood will not bend readily. So you might have to use some heat if you use wood to bend them around the curves that you're trying to negotiate. Uh, and even these require just a flash of heat with a heat gun. If you literally just wave a gun, just the way my hand did over these, they will drop just a little bit and you can squeeze them right around those curves, and the end joints, uh, they don't show at all. And the more texture there is in them, or the more chatoyance, if I could use that word, the better the ends will even butt together and they can look really cool. So the first thing I did was to use the jig that I used in that video a few days ago on making these thin strips, on slicing thin strips. I just took one of these pen blanks and I sliced it and sliced it. And if you watched the other video, you saw me do that. But today is the continuance of that. What I did was uh, I have to smooth these up. These are not consistent enough and thick, and the surfaces are far too rough to be glued to anything or to make a good visual appearance. So I got to smooth them down. And all I did was I took a piece of MDF, 3/4 inch in this case, and I took pieces of wood. Doesn't matter what they are. I use basswood because it'll sand so readily. It's just that much less work for the sander, I guess. And I laid my strips out and double face taped these pieces of basswood on here just to trap these, because these are too short to go through a drum sander. They'll catch in there, the sander will chew them up, you'll never see them again. But by doing this, I can line these up and sand those with impunity. It works very, very well. And I can determine thickness as I go down. I use a Starrett depth gauge to determine that, so you've got good measurement. As soon as I get these smooth on one side, I can lift them right up out of the gauge, out of the jig here, and I can turn them over, and then I can bring them down to the final thickness that I need, and I'm good to go. So now the next step is, how do I get those into these little widths and maintain that same 65 thousandths dimension that I want? So I've just taken all of the strips that I'm going to use. I have them over here. I've lined those up very carefully, and on the bench I've even used this nicely machined block to keep those in line. And I've gone around them with masking tape. I wrapped all the way around them because they have a tendency to want to move. It's very easy for them to slip. So I went around them with tape, and then I put double face tape on the back edge and put that on my sled. And then just for extra measure, I left the tape wide and I put this strip of basswood on there and gave it a little down pressure. Hopefully it will hold this stack tightly enough. And as pieces rip off, at least after I get this first strip off, these will rip off, and at least the top and bottom one will have a little ring of tape around it, so it might help hold the stack together. So I'm all set up with my jig. I have my material mounted here, and I've determined that I'm going to make a 90 thousandths piece when I cut this off and let it fall to the waist side, so to speak. Uh, Getting that measurement is nothing easy. I don't have a really good, reliable way of doing it. I just did it by using this. This is a Starrett depth micrometer. By setting it at 90 thousandths of an inch and then fooling around with it. I got it in the neighborhood or as close as I can figure. You know, the blade flexes, you've got to find the right tooth to measure from and the whole thing. So it gets to be a kind of a problem. But even if you drum sanded a piece to the thickness that you want and put it on there and compare it with your hand, you could probably do just as well as I did. Uh, I did, however, as soon as I got the dimension that I want, I placed this block. This is a magnetic block. And I place that so that now each time I move my saw carriage, it's going to hit the same point and I'm going to repeat the same cut. If you watch the other video I did on making these strips, you probably saw all of this. But so I'm just going to make a quick cut here and we'll see what happens. And if it all falls apart and blows up in my face, I guess I'm going to have to reinvent some other kind of wheel. I think the key to this is feeding very slowly because that blade is only 6 teeth per inch. I have found that if I use a very, very fine blade on this, 14 teeth per inch, for example, given the material, it wants to melt back around it, and it just actually makes things worse. The blade doesn't want to track, the gullets don't clear, so you're really better off with a little bit coarser blade. And there's our first set of strips. Get that tape off there. Now that looks pretty successful to me. I'm pretty happy with that. So I'm going to continue to cut these until I'm done. So I have my strips cut out from the bandsaw, and having this little band of masking tape around them is very helpful. They're as fragile as eggs, or more fragile maybe, uh, but it's helpful because at least I have these kind of in units. So they're going to be a little easier to handle. And if I'm careful, this is going to work out. Now, the show face for these is this surface that's been bandsawn. Uh, there is an orientation to a lot of these materials, and depending on how you rotate them out of the blank, you get a different look, a different chatoyance. So this is the show surface. So it's got to be refined. And of course it has to be refined because the underside of it's got to glue down, and we want a smooth surface to that for that to happen. So with these, excuse me, with these kind of unitized, I'm going to make a similar system as I showed you before, where I'm going to double face tape these right down and trap them, and I will be able to drum sand these down to the dimension that I want. Uh, But I can't do that right away because it is 6 o'clock here where I live, and that means it's time for me to close up the shop and go in the house and eat my daily bale of hay. So I'll finish this video up tomorrow, and I'll see you then. Well, I have taken my strips and I've trapped them on this piece of MDF again and retaped these strips of basswood to keep them in tight. And now I'm going to drum sand these down to 65 thousandths of an inch. There's a little bit of advantage here. This is the show surface, and if I don't hit 65 thousandths, or if I'm just a little under it, that's going to be all right because I'm going to scrape down the excess once I inlay it anyway. So even if I did nothing but get just a good smooth glue surface here, I'd probably be all right. But I'm going to try and shoot for exactly 65 thousandths. That shouldn't be too hard. So here we go, a little noisy. Now I got these smooth on my first pass, so I've rotated them and turned the smooth side down, rough side up. Right now I'm at just about 100 thousandths of an inch. So I'm going to go down a ways and bring these down to final dimension. But I decided to rotate them because I got plenty of room to do it. And right now I'm at 86 thousandths, so I'm going to go a little bit more. Now on the last pass that I just made with the drum sander, I noticed that back here at the tail end, this was starting to move a little bit. It was starting to spring, and see my basswood let go on me a little bit. I made it through okay, stroke of luck, but I have to give up at that rate. I don't want to try and retape that and redo, but that's all right because I just took a measurement and I'm at, where am I? I'm at 82 thousandths of an inch. By the way, this is a wonderful device. This is a Starrett depth micrometer, and a good friend of mine gave me this. This is just a wonderful tool. Uh, so I'm done. What I have now within each one of these bands of tape, if I can get this off here, they are a little bit fragile. There we go. Now I have all of these individual pieces of purfling, and I'm going to demonstrate what I mentioned earlier in the video to you. If I rotate these in this direction and hold them up, I'm going to get them done right here, get them oriented. Clumsy fingers today. You see, you get one look out of that. You get one color, one sort of translucence or refraction, you might say. But if I rotate those 90 degrees, you can immediately see, and I'll put one up here the way I had it before. If I put them together, you can see there's an immediate difference between what's over here, excuse me, what's over here and the two over here. And this is going to look, going around that guitar, this is going to look really, really good. Uh, while I'm here, I might as well quickly show you that this purfling is going to go around this guitar. The Rosette in this incorporates that same material around the Rosette. And so I'm going to go around the body with it, and I'm going to use a combination of this stuff and the black. So this is nice because now they're at the right width so that they're going to match up with my Teflon strips. And I'll inlay the Teflon strips along with the binding, of course, and then put that stuff right around there with some purfling on each side. It's going to look real nice. So I've got my purfling strips made up. Here they are, a whole bunch of them. And I want to point out that if you were to try this in your shop, I have found that wrapping that stack in masking tape before you get to this part, go back in the video and look at this again, but wrapping this in that masking tape is key. Now I've done this before in, I don't know, 3 or 4 different ways, and I discovered just yesterday that this is the most secure way I've found of keeping this stuff together, because if it gets out of control in your drum sander, it's goodbye. The stuff just gets chewed up and you lose so much of it. You can easily end up with having to make another lot that doesn't come out the same size, or you just lose so much of it that maybe you run out of material or something. So uh, this is I think a real important key point is to have that tape on it. Now, as I mentioned earlier, you could probably make these up in wood, and if you did, you could make them in longer strips, and you'd have a little more control over them. But if you're going to use that as purfling, bending it is going to be a little more of a challenge, I suppose. Uh, but the point of this is to have something different than wood and something that shows up with a translucence and a glow to it that wood can't provide. Now, A couple of people have asked in the comments section what this stuff is, and a couple of other people have answered. But I guess I might as well spill the beans. I've been reluctant to in the past, but this is not classified information. Uh, this stuff is in varying materials. This is pen blanks. And these are readily available from different sources around the country. You can find them easily enough. And they come in just tremendous amounts of colors and textures for you to work with. Now, I have found that some of them uh, do not work well. This one, I don't remember what the material is in this, but if you can see the edges of this, how that's all broken up, you can't cut this stuff and control it in small pieces like that, or even rosette tiles. It seems very difficult. But if you can stick with acrylics and the inlace materials, they seem quite nice. Here's even this is an acrylic. If you go for stuff like this, that's, just a crushed orange. Now, you can also get this stuff, these pen blanks, you can get them in these real nice stabilized dyed wood burls. You cannot make small strips out of these because they won't hold together. They'll just crumble. But for rosette tiles, of course, they can be real handy. And they even come in laminated stuff like this, where again, you can't make rosette or purfling strips out of it, but you can do a lot with inlay work and rosette materials for these. So um, there it is. I'm Kevin Ledoux, the Pragmatic Luthier. I hope this particular video has been particularly helpful. You do have to have a drum sander in order to do this, and you got to be able to measure precisely. In other words, you just need the equipment to be able to do that. But a digital caliper works just fine for that kind of thing. So anyway, uh, that's it. It's 6 o'clock again, and it's time for me to go back in the house and eat yet another bale of hay. So subscribe if you will. I'd appreciate it. Put a like on the video if you will. I'd appreciate that as well. This is the Pragmatic Luthier, Kevin Ledoux. Until next time, thanks for watching.